can only be invested in those core areas that will improve the business climate of that city, like making the streets safer, the schools better, and rebuilding those crumbling roads and water systems. That's what we can do, and I appreciate the time the gentleman of Arkansas has provided me, and I yield back.
Thank you for joining us here on the floor today. We appreciate it very much. I want to, we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to make sure that I yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
Well, thank the gentleman from Arkansas and the gentleman from Michigan for his words, because while we all may disagree on how to get there, we do want to make sure that the final goal is reached, and that's a stronger, better America, an America that has a strong economy that's putting people back to work. This is the 31st straight month where unemployment has exceeded 8%. It's got to end. It's got to stop. This country needs to get an economy that's back on track. In August, I spent a lot of time visiting with businesses around my district in eastern and northern Colorado, and one of the initiatives that we launched was an initiative called the One More Job Initiative. And the idea was to learn from job creators, those people who are on the front lines of our economy, what it takes for them to create another job, what would help their business grow and expand to the point where they could hire somebody else, so that their customers are returning, so that they're able to sell their goods, their products, their services, so that that business could expand and grow again. Because in Colorado, if every business, if just 10% of businesses in Colorado hired one person, if just 10% of Colorado businesses hired one person, we'd create 60,000 jobs in the state of Colorado alone. In my home state, 60,000 jobs. That's not by telling businesses that they have to hire people. That's not by telling people that they've got to do X, Y, or Z, but it's saying, all right, if we can get this economy growing again, what is it that would allow you to expand? And so excited to share with the Congress, my colleagues, ideas that job creators in Colorado have about what it would take to get their businesses hiring again. An independent consultant and business owner had this to say in response to our One More Job initiative. As a startup consultant and owner of my own business, I see the day-to-day regulatory burdens and uncertainties that many employers, both small and large, face. It seems to me that small businesses, including high-tech startups, are operating on the edge of knowing. They operate month to month or even day to day, only to find out that a government fee, regulation, or tax threatens to close their doors. You know, we have a kerfuffle every day on this floor about what it will take to move this economy forward, about what it's going to take to start creating jobs again. Let's listen to a car dealer. Tourism, many jobs here. Build a strategy of promoting the state's beauty on a consistent basis. I'm glad to say that last night this body, the House of Representatives, passed a bill to increase the opportunity for tourism in Colorado around our ski resorts, our ski slopes in Colorado. The opportunity to not just generate jobs during the ski season itself, but to allow off-season uses, multiple seasons of use, zip lines, alpine slides, creating jobs in tourism in Colorado. This body passed that bill last night. I hope the Senate will pass it soon so that we can start creating jobs. When I hear from my colleagues around Washington, D.C., around the country, saying that the House of Representatives hasn't passed a jobs bill, we passed the Jobs and Energy Permitting Act, would create 54,000 jobs. Last night, we passed a bill that would add to tourism jobs in Colorado, across the state, across the country. And so we are passing these bills. They need to move through the Senate. They need to be signed by the President. The fact is we've got a lot of work to be done, and I thank the gentleman from Arkansas for allowing us to be here today to share that message.
I want to yield back to the gentlelady from Alabama.
The only other thing that I would have to offer is to say that as we move forward in the next coming months and weeks is that we've got to find common ground, but we do not have to forfeit our principles in doing so. We stand by the things that conservatives stand by. It's a three-legged stool. We're fiscally responsible, we're socially conservative, and we are pro-military, pro-defense. And we can still stand on that stool, but yet continue to seek opportunities to find common ground. The problem is that the Senate is not even having this conversation. We watched 2 weeks ago also is they tabled the continuing resolution that we passed in the House, meaning they're not even going to take an up or down vote on this and ultimately passed something much different. We are asking our friends on the other side of the aisle in the Senate and the White House to have a conversation with us. We have passed all of these bills that will lift the heavy hand of government off of the very job creators in this country, and we just want an opportunity to debate and then find where we do have share that common ground, again, without ever compromising our core conservative principles. Thank you again to the gentleman from Arkansas. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend this hour with you.
Sure. I'd like to say a few things, if I could, about the President's so-called jobs bill. We've heard about the desire for bipartisanship. We've heard about the desire to work together and find common ground. Well, not too long ago, the President visited us here in the House, and he spoke from the podium. And he talked about his new jobs bill. Well, he didn't talk about finding common ground. He didn't really talk about meeting us halfway, finding areas we could agree on. He just said, pass my bill. Pass it as it is. Then he ran around the country saying, pass my bill, pass it as it is. Well, at that time, there wasn't even a bill here in the House to pass. And when we finally did get the text of it, we saw that it certainly didn't reflect bipartisan agreement, it certainly didn't reflect meeting halfway. It was Stimulus 2, Stimulus the sequel. And we know how ineffective the first stimulus was. I'm here to work with other folks, find areas where we can agree, and move forward. But the shortage, there hasn't been a shortage of bills and legislation passed in this House. As we talked about earlier, we've passed bill after bill after bill that will help create an environment in this country where the private sector will want to do business and grow jobs. When the President's bill finally got here, his so-called jobs plan, we found out there are not even enough Democrats to pass it in the Senate. I see just a few minutes ago, the Republican leader in the Senate wanted to have an immediate vote on the President's jobs bill, and he's been blocked. He's been blocked by the Democrat majority leader in the Senate. He didn't want to allow a vote on the President's jobs bill. I suspect that has something to do with the fact that most of the Democrats over there aren't going to vote for it either. They didn't just get here. They were around when the last stimulus passed, and they realized how ineffective it was. And so the President can't even convince his own party to support his so-called jobs bill. I think at the end of the day, we can agree here that we want to pass legislation that will help the private sector grow and create jobs. No question. No question. And we've passed a number of those here, and we're willing to work on more. What we need is the Senate to actually take up some of the stuff that we've passed. Because I'll just say this, I've talked to a lot of job creators in the 2nd Congressional District of Arkansas, which is basically central Arkansas, with Little Rock at the core. And a lot of them, they have money to invest and expand and create jobs, but they're holding on to it. Why? Because they're uncertain about the future. They don't have confidence in the direction of this country. They're worried. So they do, businesses, job creators do what families do. They hold tightly to their money, save up, hoping that things will get better, hoping that they will gain some confidence in the direction of the country so that they can then spend that money to expand a plant and hire more people and what have you. So what makes them uncertain? What makes them worried? Well, what I hear is overregulation, the need for tax reform so that we can be competitive with other countries, the health care bill that passed last year. That's got a bunch of folks worried because they don't know what the impact's going to be. The Dodd-Frank bill is absolutely killing our small-town community banks that are a critical source of credit for small businesses and families. They're worried to death. All of this stuff. And let's not leave out the debt. People are concerned about the debt because the national debt affects the markets, it affects interest rates, it affects the value of our currency, and folks see what's going on in Europe, and they say, man, if we don't get this under control, that we're next. All of that is all of those different concerns, those worries, add to the uncertainty. I want to yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Arkansas. And to your point, what you're talking about, the direct consequences that legislation and regulation is having on job creators throughout the United States. Another email that I got from a business owner in Longmont, Colorado, he makes comments about how the Frank Dodd bill, Dodd-Frank, is affecting his business. And he ends his comments with this: right now, Dodd-Frank appears to have completely killed my business. We dealt earlier today, we'll continue to deal with the Cement Act rule that talks about what we're going to do to basic manufacturing elements in our country when it comes to cement. If we're going to pave the road to a better economy, we better not do it without cement, because this government's about to say no more cement in this country.
That's right.
And so I thank the gentleman from Arkansas for his passion for job creators in this country.
Well, I think you were there yesterday when we had a visit from some folks in the cement, concrete industry. I was taught yesterday the difference between cement and concrete. Cement's what we use to create concrete. And he sat there and he said, look, I got a lot of employees. I want to hire more. I want to grow. But this regulation, this Cement Act regulation is going to kill a lot of our businesses, because it's going to set a standard way beyond the European standard, and it's going to set a standard, a regulatory standard, that our businesses cannot meet no matter how much they spend. I think you mentioned that one company had spent $20 million trying to comply, trying to tighten up their operations to meet some of these regulations. He even said this regulation is so stringent you can't even measure. You can't even measure what the EPA is trying to achieve. It's beyond our ability to measure. It's not that these guys are against regulations. He said in our meeting, he said, we've been regulated for years. We're going to continue to be regulated, and we're cool with that. We get that. We understand that. But this type of regulation will put us out of business, and the only people making cement will be elsewhere. He said the cement business is growing big time in China. And to compete, we've got to have common sense regulation. I yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
Well, and thank you. And I think in that same conversation we talked about an editorial or op-ed piece that was written by Charles Schwab, a very well-respected voice when it comes to the economy in this country. And in the Wall Street Journal editorial it said basically this, a quote from Charles Schwab: "What we can do, and absolutely must, is knock down all hurdles that create disincentives for investment in business." And that's exactly what you were talking about in terms of making sure businesses have the ability to grow and have the government getting out of the way. Thank you.
I want to yield now to the gentleman from New York.
I thank the gentleman from Arkansas, and I simply wanted to end this conversation as I get ready to leave, and as our colleague from Kansas has joined us, is that I think the gentlelady from Alabama said it best. We came here as a new breed of elected official, part of this freshman class. We are not here to compromise our principles, but we're here to govern responsibly.
Get things done.
Get things done. And we can do that. And that's why I was so pleased that our colleague from Michigan joined us today. Even though we may disagree on many things, there is common ground there. He recognized lower taxes creates a business climate upon which entrepreneurs can put people back to work. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. Now it's time to have the Senate and the President engage with the American people in an open and honest fashion and deal with these issues once and for all. Because if we continue to play politics of yesterday, then America's brightest days are behind her. And to me, that is unacceptable. And I know to all my colleagues here today, that is also unacceptable to them. And with that, I yield back.
Appreciate it. I want to yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin and the gentleman from Kansas.
Thank you. And, I think we all come to this House in an effort to grow the economy and make sure we have policies that are going to help create jobs. And we don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat idea, just we want ideas that are going to work. So the partisanship goes away. It's ideas that put our families back to work. I want to talk about taxes, though, quickly, because I think there has been an engagement in class warfare. And I know the President, he talks about taxing millionaires and billionaires, corporate jet owners and big oil companies. I don't have those people really in my district. I come from small-town America. And he talks about taxing those people, but what he leaves out is he's here to tax the small businessman, the small manufacturer, the people who are making $200,000 to $250,000 a year. Those are the businessmen and women in my community that own the small manufacturing shop that employ 10 people to 100 people. Those are the people that are looking for access to capital to grow their businesses that are going to put our hardworking families back to work. And those are the people that are going to pay the brunt of these tax increases that the President's talking about. So, you know what? The billionaires, I don't care. But I do care about my job creators in my community, in the district that I represent, that are going to be hit by his proposed tax increases. And we all come to this House floor and we talk about debt reduction and job growth. A simple point I want to make here. If you look back at 1955, the top tax rate was around 90%. The Reagan years, it was around 25%. 90 to 25%. Great span of tax rates. What's unique is that no matter what the tax rate is, the federal government continuously brings in about 19 to 20% of revenue as it relates to the size of the economy or GDP. Tax rate increases don't actually bring in more revenue. But if you want to look at what brings in more revenue to the federal coffers, it's economic growth. When GDP grows, so too does revenue to the federal coffers. And that's because more people are going to work, which means more people are paying taxes. So if we want to reduce our debt and put our people back to work, let's focus on policies that grow our economy. When we grow our economy, more money comes into the federal coffers, and more people are working, supporting their families, and paying taxes. And those are the policies that we're advocating for here in this House. With that, I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'll yield to the gentleman from Kansas.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman from Arkansas yielding a few minutes here, and I've been watching this debate as we discuss what are, to most people, common sense American values. Hard work, a free enterprise system, and opportunity for all. The American system we all believe in that made our country so great, one of the most prosperous nations in history, the most prosperous nation in the world. And we see it being threatened every day by policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C., and it's a heartache for a lot of us because we see the very principles that built this country being threatened in this very process. And so I'm pleased that the gentleman from Arkansas and the gentleman from Wisconsin, the gentleman from Colorado are all arguing so passionately today for what they see as the future of the United States of America. And I think one of the things that confuses a lot of folks back home is they see both sides of this debate on the floor saying, we're all for jobs. In fact, some people just come down and repeat it. Jobs, jobs, jobs. They say, where are the jobs? And we just keep saying jobs over and over again, as if that's somehow miraculously going to get the private sector to start creating jobs again. And so they've come up with Washington solutions, borrowing and spending, creating jobs in Washington, D.C. And what we know is that jobs aren't created here in Washington. They're created at home by small business owners. They're created through the free enterprise system. That's what made our country great. But I think the reason this debate is so challenging, and the reason that we're having such a hard time, I think, getting the sides to agree and the two chambers to agree and the presidents to agree, is because we have different principles by which we're arguing this debate. And I want to lay out a couple very common sense principles that I wish this Congress could agree to and this government could agree to so that we can move forward with job creation. The first one is regulations don't create jobs. And if we could get this body to simply agree that regulations don't create jobs, we would be moving a long way down the path toward job creation.
Can I interject that over-regulation kills jobs?
That's absolutely correct. And so the regulations we're putting forward, not only do they not create jobs, but the gentleman from Arkansas is correct, they kill jobs. But yet I hear folks on this House floor, I see folks on the left, I see folks in the media arguing repeatedly that these regulations are actually good for business. In fact, Robert Reich argued earlier this year, said there's no necessary trade-off between regulations and jobs. In fact, regulations that are designed well can generate innovation as companies compete to find the most efficient solutions. And innovation can lead to more jobs. They spawn new products in industries. Regulations don't create innovation. Regulations don't create jobs. They are a job killer. And this is a common sense principle that I know a majority of Americans agree with, and it's one that is completely refuted day after day on this House floor. And if we can come to an agreement that regulations don't create jobs, we can get somewhere. And one of the reasons we don't, and you've been debating this today, this afternoon, is because they create additional burdens and additional hoops and additional challenges for small business owners that we're expecting to create 2/3 of the jobs in this country. In fact, just for fun, I brought down the stack of rules and regulations that have come out just in the last week. Every day, for those at home, those watching on the floor, every day our small business owners have to deal with another one of these. Another one of these every day. There's last Tuesday, there's last Wednesday, there's last Thursday, there's last Friday. A pile of new rules and regulations for business owners. Even if they don't affect them, they still need to read them and follow them and hire folks to be able to respond to them. And you talk to folks at home and you say, are you creating jobs? Are you hiring new folks? And they say, we are hiring a few folks in the compliance department. So yeah, you might create a new job, but you're killing the jobs on innovation, on entrepreneurship, and free enterprise. And the other principle I want to leave with the folks here is that taxes don't create jobs. Taxing and spending doesn't create wealth. And that is something that is in dispute on this House floor. And if we could get an agreement with both parties that, look, regulations don't create jobs and taxing and spending doesn't create jobs, we would be going a long way to solving this debate. So when folks at home wonder, why are they arguing so much? Why can't they ever get anything done? Why aren't they moving forward? Because we're debating basic common sense principles of the free enterprise system. And folks come down here and argue, hey, these regulations are good for jobs. Hey, these new tax increases, that's good to create jobs. We're not going to get the free enterprise system going while we're smacking them down with new taxes and new regulations every day. And so I appreciate the gentleman from Arkansas, the gentleman from Colorado, and others down here having this debate because it is essential to what it means to be an American and this free enterprise system we all believe in.
I think the gentleman, and I want to use a little analogy, have a little fun here for a second. If you have two runners and they're lined up ready to race, and one runner is simply going to run straight to the finish line, and the other runner has to run through an obstacle course, who do you think's going to win? Well, I think we would all agree that the one who's just going to run straight, not going to have to jump over anything, not going to have to swim or climb a rope or whatever, go through tires, just run straight to the finish line, that runner's going to have a big advantage over the other runner. The other runner is going to have to climb a rope, go over a wall, go through the tires, do all the things that you do in an obstacle course. Well, the obstacle course, that's regulation. And we need basic fundamental regulation to keep us safe, keep our kids safe. I understand that. But that shows you what we're dealing with. You've got some countries who have little or no regulation, so their runners are just running down that track straight, unimpeded. And we're putting up walls for ours, and then we wonder, why can't we compete? Why aren't people investing? Why aren't they creating jobs in the private sector? Well, it has a lot to do with Washington, D.C., my friend. Yes, sir, the gentleman from Colorado.
My colleague from Arkansas has a great point that steeplechase economics will not work. It's when you remove the barriers, it's when you get things out of the way of this economy to grow, that's when we can create jobs. But if you're making people jump over walls and through water hazards, I mean, again, steeplechase economics have proven time and time again that they are failures. Our colleague from Kansas has shown a great visual aid of what every business owner in this country is facing when it comes to their own business, when it comes to creating jobs, when they have to decide where they're going to invest their hard-earned capital. They've got to go through pages and pages and volumes of tax codes and regulatory decisions and court decisions about what it is that they can or cannot do in their business, making this economy so that it actually unleashes the innovators and entrepreneurs.
And I'd make a quick point on that if I could. Some folks who want to invest, they've had the dream all their life to create a small business, a little shop. Maybe it's a bike shop. But to create that business, a lot of them are going to look at the metaphorical race, see the obstacles, and refuse to enter the race.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I thank the Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for joining me tonight here on the floor. Thank you all.
The chair is prepared to recognize a member of the minority party for 30 minutes. There's no one here from the minority party. Okay. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, for 30 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today, and I certainly appreciate my friends enlightening the chamber and those that may be prone to listening, Mr. Speaker. I want to add a little bit to the enlightenment, as we've seen that the President is out there saying, well, here was an article from the AP dated October 4th saying that President Barack Obama is criticizing House Majority Leader Eric Cantor for saying the President's $447 billion jobs bill will not get a vote in its entirety in the Republican-led House. The President singled out Mr. Cantor, according to the article. It says, quote, I'd like Mr. Cantor to come down here to Dallas and explain what in this jobs bill he doesn't believe in, unquote. It says Obama said in remarks prepared for delivery Tuesday at a Texas community college. And as we know, the President would have been reading those remarks because he wouldn't want to stray far from the teleprompter with remarks. We've seen what happens on those occasions, and it isn't pretty. But the article says 3 weeks after Obama sent the legislation to Congress, the proposal has run into resistance from Republicans and even some Democrats. Well, see, the article's not quite accurate on that, because we know that the President came in here in this very body after he demanded to come speak, which requires an invitation. You can't just come speak on the House floor unless you're recognized by the Speaker, you're a member of the House, or if the House votes to allow someone to come in who's not a member. Some people are surprised when they come in, Mr. Speaker, that the President's not up there where you are. but the rules make very clear, this is the people's house. And so the president can only come, just like any other leader that's invited. Prime Minister Netanyahu, they speak from the second podium because they're invited guests. Well, now it's a little bit rude to demand to come speak in someone's house, and then you come in there and lecture them, and you state things like repeatedly saying you got to pass this bill right away, right now, pass this bill, and it turns out you didn't even have a bill. You have the gall to come in here and demand we pass a bill, and you hadn't even got a bill. And then on Friday, the president hit the campaign, well, maybe not the campaign trail, whatever you want to call it. He was out there spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to go to different places around the country and demand we pass this bill. Tell Congress, pass my bill. And he didn't have a bill. Saturday, Sunday, he's out there saying, pass my bill right now, pass it right away. People go to work immediately. Never mind that he had to take a vacation before he could get around to producing a bill, if it was that important. Never mind that he's going around telling everybody we should make Congress pass a bill that doesn't exist. Well, on Monday, my office, I was a little bothered that we were being condemned for not passing a bill that didn't exist. So we were pushing to try to get a copy of this phantom bill. And late that afternoon, we finally got a copy, emailed. I printed it out that Monday night around 11 p.m. I started going through the president's bill. Now, by Wednesday, when no bill was filed, and the president was still running around spending millions of taxpayer dollars condemning Congress for not passing his bill, when he was so busy out there telling people to make Congress pass my bill, he forgot to have anybody file the bill. 6 days we were condemned here in this chamber for not passing the president's bill. He was so busy condemning Congress for not passing this bill, he forgot to ask somebody to file it for him. Well, by Wednesday, I got tired of being condemned for not passing the American Jobs Act. So I filed an American Jobs Act. Mine's 2 pages. It's H.R. 2911. And it would create more jobs in America than anything that the president's ever even talked about. Because though you have businessmen very successful like Donald Trump saying we ought to slap a 25% tariff on everything we buy from China, that starts a trade war. I'm sure we don't win. I don't think China wins. I don't think anybody wins. But it would be messy. And China owns so much of our debt, unfortunately, that's probably not a smart move right now until we get out from under this debt. The Bible talks very clearly about what happens when you allow somebody to own your debt. Basically, you become a slave to them. So I'm looking forward to the day we don't owe China, we don't owe foreign countries. We get out of debt because we balance our budget. Looks like it'll take a balanced budget amendment to do that. But in the meantime, there's no treaty that would be violated, no trade agreement, no court order anywhere in the world that would prevent us from eliminating the 35% tariff that we put on all American-made goods before they're able to sell them abroad. It's called a 35% corporate tax, largest corporate tax in the world. Number one reason that I've heard from CEOs as to why they moved their businesses to other countries. So my 2-page bill, the American Jobs Act, and I do appreciate the President promoting the American Jobs Act. That's my bill. It reduces the 35% corporate tax to 0. Now, there are some people that never really got economics and they don't understand the way the real world works. They think the real world works like CBO's archaic rules that say you can't take actual historic precedents to figure out what effect a bill will have. Never mind, even if the same result always occurs after a certain thing is done, you can't consider that because the 1974 Liberal Congress that ran us out of Vietnam and left all our allies there to be killed by our enemies, that same Congress put in the rules for CBO to score bills. So you don't get a fair look at what really happens with CBO rules, and there's some people think those rules are the way you have to look at things. But the fact is that if you reduced the corporate tax, especially to zero, jobs would come flooding back into America. Now, I would think unions would love this bill. If you really want union jobs back in America, if you're really willing to say, you know what, forget this business about America being nothing but a service economy. Let's get manufacturing jobs. You really want manufacturing jobs back, then eliminate the 35% insidious tariff we put on American-made goods before they can be sold abroad. But, as I've said here on the floor, I'm willing to negotiate, be bipartisan. The president can't bring himself to get to zero, then let's negotiate somewhere in between. You know, we could do that. Herman Cain's talking about 9%. But to have the president out there demanding that we pass his bill, and then he's saying things about it that simply are not factual. Not factual at all, and I know because I read the bill. And I'm very irritated with people that think the president's lying about his bill, because I believe I can prove he's not lying about his bill. He doesn't know what's in his bill. You can't lie about something you don't know, and I believe I can prove the president is not a liar. Absolutely not. He gave that speech in here on Thursday night. The next day, he's on the road condemning Congress for not passing his bill. There was no bill yet. Saturday, on the road condemning Congress for not passing his bill. There's no bill. Still keeping that up all day Monday. Well, it wasn't until Monday that his bill got finished. There's no way he could keep giving those speeches every single day all over the country and have had the 6 or 7 hours I did between 11 p.m., 5 to 6 a.m. I've said 5, but I was still going a while. But at least 6 hours that I took the night the bill came out to go through his bill. He hadn't had that time. There's no way the president could work that 6-hour schedule or time in his schedule to go through the bill like I did. There's no way to condemn the president for not knowing what's in his bill when he hasn't had time. He's been too busy condemning Congress for not passing it. How could he know what was in it? And then today, of course, we see that the president's knocking the GOP leadership, and he's telling people on the campaign trail. See, this is an article from Yahoo News by Chris Moody. President Obama, it says here, President Obama is in Dallas today urging Americans who support the American Jobs Act to demand that Congress pass it already. Though it's been nearly a month since he laid out his plan, or this plan, House Republicans haven't acted to pass it. And House Majority Leader Eric Cantor is out there actually bragging that they won't even put the jobs package up for a vote ever. It's not clear which part of the bill they now object to: building roads, hiring teachers, getting veterans back to work. They're willing to block the American Jobs Act, and they think you won't do anything about it. Apparently those are the president's words, according to the article. Best I understand this. Oh, this was the president's re-election campaign sent out an email blasting House Republicans for not voting on the proposal. Well, as of just been in the last hour, while the president's condemning the Republicans for not passing his bill, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, tried to force a vote on the president's plan in the upper chamber Tuesday afternoon, but Reid used a procedural tactic to block the bill from coming to the floor. He called the Republicans' insistence on a vote a publicity stunt. So the president, he hadn't had time to read the bill. He hadn't had time to find out who is really blocking his bill. Well, it turns out it's Harry Reid in the Senate. And based on the things the president has said, I know he hasn't read this, because I know the president would not be dishonest. When he's out there and has repeatedly said, you know, we're going to make millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, I know he wouldn't go out there and say that if he knew the truth about what was in his bill. Because in his bill, at page 134 and 135, it gives the definition of who's rich and who's going to get it socked to them. The president has been saying repeatedly millionaire and billionaire, but bless his heart, if he had time to read the bill, and I hope somebody will carve out some time for him to do that. I know his speech schedule out there condemning Congress has kept him tied up, but if they could work in some time for him to read his own bill and just stop condemning Congress for just a little bit, he could finally, if he has enough time to get to page 135, he'll find out that the people he's going after that he says are millionaires and billionaires in his bill, it's not a jobs bill. Since I'd used the name that the president was originally plugging, I think his bill would be better called the Saving Obama's Jobs Bill. But that may not be fair either, because if people really find out what's in this bill, I don't think they'd be very happy. I'm not sure it saves his job. But he defines millionaire and billionaire right here on page 135 as any taxpayer whose adjusted gross income is above, and I go to see, $125,000 in the case of a married filing separately return. And that's $250,000 in the case of a joint return, which is married filing jointly. But, and here again, this may be something nice he's throwing out for gay folks that are living together, and so he can tell them, actually, you're better off not getting married, because there's a marriage penalty here if you're the head of a single household. You've got an exemption of $225,000. If you're all other cases, $200,000. So it really penalizes married individuals, and apparently, according to this bill, a millionaire or billionaire is somebody who makes $125,000. But the good news, if you think this is good news, if you want to get divorced, it is good news for you, because if you're married and you're filing a joint return and two people get $250,000 exemption, or you're married filing singly and you get $125,000 exemption, the good news, if you're thinking about divorce, is you can actually get divorced and have $75,000 to $100,000 higher exemption if you just get divorced, and you can even live together. This is the president's proposal. Live together and you get a whole lot more of an exemption than if you're married. Now, of course, the founders, they all understood marriage to be between a man and a woman, and that's the way the history of the country's been. And study after study has shown that children, the odds are children will be better adjusted if they have the two-parent home, the traditional two-parent home. Obviously, there are some homes that aren't good, and children are not well served there. But this president, by virtue of the power to, as the old saying, the power to tax, the power to destroy, takes a shot at traditional, conventional marriage. And so, and then there's an additional AMT amount. That's subsection little c. because if you're a millionaire or a billionaire and you're making, which means you make more than $125,000 you're married, there is an extra penalty for you that the president's got lying waiting for you in his so-called jobs bill. I don't know if he's aware. I just don't see how he could be, because he's been so busy out making speeches everywhere. But if you were to look, Mr. Speaker, at the stuff in here, well, he says it's about jobs, so I bet the president does not know that here at page 75, we've got a new federal entity, although it's defined on page 76 as a private non-profit corporation called the Public Safety Broadband Corporation. Because this president believes there's danger in people having broadband in their home. Can you really trust the American people? Has to be the theme of this part of the president's so-called jobs bill. Apparently, he thinks there's a public safety threat in broadband that people have coming into their home and business. So he's created this private non-profit corporation. Well, you might say, well, good. Thank goodness it's not government. It's a private non-profit corporation that will control everybody's broadband. Good news, is it? Because when you look down at section 285, halfway down page 76, you see who's on the board of directors. And even though it's a private non-profit corporation, the board of directors is comprised of, the federal members are the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Homeland Security, Attorney General of the United States, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I believe those are all appointed by the president. How about that? But it's a private nonprofit corporation, so surely the federal government wouldn't try to control it. But the Secretary of Commerce, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security and Attorney General, shall appoint 11 other individuals who serve as non-federal members of the board. Well, isn't that happy news? They're not really federal, even though the president's appointees are the ones that will be on the board with these folks. They'll owe their appointment to them. But it's just interesting. I bet the president has no idea. And, of course, I know the president's aware of what a fiasco to our federal budget Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have been, and the danger that it posed to our federal economic system. Well, he's probably not aware that in here he creates, his bill does, I'm sure there's no way he could know what's in this bill. He's too busy running around condemning us for not passing. There's no way he could have spent 6 hours reading this, 6 to 7 hours like I did. But anyway, if he'll double check, he'll find, Mr. Speaker, that page 40, whoever wrote this bill thinks Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were a wonderful, wonderful thing. Federal government insuring all these home loans, and then, of course, we passed laws, and I do remember our friend from Massachusetts, Mr. Frank, assuring everybody they're in good shape, not a problem. Turned out they weren't in good shape. He didn't know. Mr. Frank wouldn't come down here and misrepresent something like that. I know. He wouldn't. He just didn't know. Just like the president has no clue what all is in this bill. But if he'll check at the bottom of page 40, he'll find the American Infrastructure Financing Authority says it's established as a wholly owned government corporation. So if you like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you think they've done a great job, you're going to love this bill. It's like both of them combined, exponentially increased and put on steroids. Because we know houses compared to infrastructure don't cost all that much. But boy, you compare them to infrastructure, man. And wouldn't it be great? This has to be the thinking of whoever put this bill together. And I know it wasn't the president, because he couldn't have put this together and gone around telling people things that are in it, not knowing this kind of stuff is in it. But the American Infrastructure Financing Authority, and we could do that like we did the flood insurance. You know, the federal government says, well, we need a federal player in the insurance business, and so we provided a federal option. Well, guess what? The federal government runs in the red on the flood insurance. Private companies can't keep up with that. And so people quit providing, or insurance companies quit providing flood insurance for the most part, and the federal government became the flood insurer. Same way with student loans. Banks, other lending institutions could lend money for student loans, and they were backed by the government. But under Speaker Pelosi and this president, Harry Reid, federal government decided we're going to take over all the student loans. Well, that creates a concern for some, because if you're as outspoken as some of us are, I'm just grateful my daughter has just finished her college degree, so I won't have to come begging to the president for a student loan so my children can go to college. Is that what we want? Is that where we want the infrastructure financing to go? Every school district, town, county, state has to come begging to the federal government because we run everybody else out of the business like we did student loans, flood insurance? Surely the president doesn't know this is in here. This is not a jobs bill. It's a government takeover. Same with the public safety broadband authority or corporation. And how about this? I bet a lot of folks don't know about the short-time compensation program. It's a new program, never created before, but it's in the president's bill. If and the participation, it says, is involuntary, but if an employer under this program reduces hours worked by employees instead of laying them off, then, and that's anybody that's been reduced by at least 10%, then it says they're eligible for unemployment compensation. It gives out the terms for that. I bet the president doesn't know that's in there. Now, I have to agree with him. It is a jobs bill for plaintiffs' lawyers, because we have seen over and over a lot of states doing tort reform. It's more and more difficult to sue people. And so we have got a new program here that will help with lawyers that are out of work, because here in the bill, if you we created a new class of protected individuals, so that if you're unemployed and you get laid off, you ought to see a lawyer if you feel like you weren't hired because you're unemployed, because you can sue, you can file a claim at least against the employer that didn't hire you. Now, a practical look at that provision, allowing employers to be sued if they fail to hire someone who's unemployed, would make employers, I've already heard from them, if that ends up in the law, I'm not going to be hiring anybody. I can't take a chance on being sued or having claims filed against me because I didn't hire 5 people unemployed come in, 4 of them don't get the job, and they all 4 file claims against me. I can't afford that. So I think once the president ever gets to look at his bill, then he'll understand this is not what he's thinking it is. And, of course, he's promised America we're going after major oil companies. There is no way this president could know that page 151 through 154, the part that goes after oil companies, will not affect his friends at British Petroleum, the Exxon, Shell. They won't be affected because the most important deductions that are repealed here are only for smaller producers, the independent producers who drill 94% of all the oil and gas wells on the land in the continental U.S. There's no way he could know that, even if he read this, unless he really understood the oil and gas industry. So what he'll do, he dries up the capital for companies trying to drill wells, and this will be a disaster unless you're a major oil company, in which case you'll make more profit than you've ever made because you kill off all the independent competition. That's what his bill does, and I'm sure he doesn't know that. Now, they've also been out there blaming Republicans for increasing the debt, and this was in an article. We've got it up on my website, the House website, so people can really see what has happened. It's a great article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and this is one of the diagrams. It shows who really increased the debt. We know from the Constitution that it is the Congress that holds the purse strings. So really, the one responsible, most responsible, is the Congress. And who's most responsible? The biggest, most powerful body is controlled by the Speaker. You, Mr. Speaker. That is why you're the pro tem. But this shows the increase in debt as a percentage of GDP. And we see what happened under Speaker O'Neill. We see what happened under Speaker Jim Wright. Didn't really increase much in debt as a percent of GDP. Under Speaker Foley, it increased a great deal. And actually, under Speaker Gingrich and Speaker Hastert, as a percentage of debt as a percent of GDP, went way down. And then we got the last 4 years with Speaker Pelosi, and it went through the roof like has never happened in this country's history. Well, I hope I provided an adequate defense to those who would say the President is misrepresented, because I think I've got proof. The President didn't lie about any of this stuff. He hadn't had time to read it. He doesn't know what's in it. And I hope and pray that he'll take the time to do that.
Gentleman's time has expired.
So he can accurately represent the Saving Obama's Job Bill. And I appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the President's support for the American Jobs Act, which bill is mine. Thank you. You're back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January the 5th, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Barletta, for 30 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, on September 7th, 8th, and 9th, the Susquehanna River and some of its tributaries, swollen by the remnants of Tropical Storm Lee, overflowed their banks. This happened shortly after northeastern Pennsylvania was soaked by Hurricane Irene, which brought local rivers and creeks to their banks. So when Tropical Storm Lee moved in over my district, the results were catastrophic. In some communities, the floodwaters came quickly. Creeks raged out of control. Homes were swept off their foundations and toppled into muddy pits. Roads were washed away. In other communities, the water rose more slowly, but it did no less damage. I was there in the town of Duryea, Pennsylvania, when the Lackawanna River topped the small levee and began flooding homes. It was like watching someone fill an aquarium, only this was much, much more destructive. I spent many days in September traveling across my district to see firsthand the devastation caused by this flooding. It's hard to describe exactly what it looks like. Think of everything you have on the first floor of your home: your couch, reclining chairs, your refrigerator, your stove, your dishwasher, your television. Maybe you have a bedroom on the first floor, your mattress, your dresser. Then think of everything you have in your basement: a washer, a dryer, your furnace, your hot water heater, your winter clothing. Now imagine all of that on the sidewalk, ready for a dumpster because it is soaked with river water. It's dirty with river mud. And it's contaminated by whatever else flowed into the river when the water rose. But go beyond these possessions. Think of the photographs on your walls and on your end tables. Think of your children's toys in the basement. Think of the mementos, family treasures handed down to you by your parents and your grandparents. Now imagine all of that on the sidewalk too. But it's not just your house. It's your neighbor's house next door and the house across the street and all of those houses up and down your street Imagine entire neighborhoods, block after block of destruction. And imagine the smell of it. Wet fabric, spoiled food, spilled fuel oil, raw sewage, and mud. Mud 2 feet deep in basements and covering lawns and filling swimming pools. That is what I experienced. That is what my constituents experienced. It's what they're continuing to cope with as they try to rebuild. I will never forget standing in a living room with a woman in West Nanticoke. Most of her belongings were piled on the street in front of her home. She wept as she told me that both her husband and her son died in the last 6 months. During this flooding, she lost almost everything she owned. Think about that. She lost her husband. She lost her son. She lost most of her belongings. She lost her home, all in 6 months. The loss is just incredible. I've seen children console their parents, saying, "Mommy, don't cry." In Shikshini, a mother pointed to a leather jacket and remembered the first time her daughter wore it. She broke down as she told me she hoped her grandchild would wear it someday. It too was ruined and had to be thrown away. An old black and white photograph of a woman sat on a pile of belongings in front of a home in West Pittston. The surface of the photo was covered in muddy streaks, as if the owner tried to save it. But she couldn't save it from the mud. It had to be thrown away. Another memory lost. In Bloomsburg, a family stayed in their home to try to move their possessions to an upper floor. But Fishing Creek rose too quickly. The house next to theirs was knocked from its foundation. Water started gushing through their front windows as they called for help. They had to be saved by a helicopter. The woman there told me that she can never live in that home again. A woman near Orangeville cried as she told me her neighbor's house, carried by the same raging creek, smashed into hers, demolishing a lifetime of memories. An elderly man in Duryea broke down as he told me how much time and money he put into making his house a home for his family, only to see it all ruined by high water. In Exeter, borough officials made a gut-wrenching decision. They hauled in 200 truckloads of dirt and created a makeshift dike right down the middle of a residential street. Several dozen homes were saved, but dozens more were ruined. Scenes like this were repeated hundreds, thousands of times in town after town in northeastern Pennsylvania. And all of these damaged homes and businesses were, if all of these homes and businesses were in one city, it would make the evening news every day. But the damage sustained by my constituents is spread out over miles of the Susquehanna River Basin. The scope of this damage goes far beyond what the local and state governments can fix on their own. The federal government must step in. Mr. Speaker, I ask, what are we going to do to make these people's lives whole again? Officials from the Federal Emergency Management Agency have told my constituents what they will receive for their losses. It's about what it costs for an American family to buy a decent car nowadays. That's for all of their furniture. That's for all of their clothes, for all of their treasured belongings. For many of my constituents, it's not nearly enough. I remember standing in front of one family's home which had river water flowing more than a foot deep up on its second floor. Most of this family's possessions were piled onto the sidewalk. Some were dripping wet. The mother looked at her children's toys ruined by the flood. She pointed to one little toy and said, "How can the government put a price on that? My son played with that. Those are memories. How can you put a price on that?" She's right. We cannot put a price tag on memories, but the federal government can and should do more for our neighbors. I know that in these budget-conscious times we worry about offsets to increases in any other spending. I also know we can find some duplicative program, some excessive spending, some additional funding somewhere in the vast federal budget and provide more help for flood victims. The United States of America is one of the most generous, compassionate countries when it comes to providing global aid. This government has no problem sending money overseas to build roads and bridges and hospitals and schools in foreign countries. When disaster strikes anywhere in the world, the United States is the first country to help rebuild. But now that a disaster occurred right here in our own backyard, we need to start rebuilding here first. Let's help Americans first. We must restore American lives, save American businesses, and protect American jobs. At a time when we're so focused on creating jobs and helping businesses, the United States Small Business Administration will offer disaster recovery loans at 6%. That's right, 6%. And that rate is if a business owners can get credit elsewhere. That is not acceptable. I've talked to dozens of business owners in Luzerne and Columbia counties who've lost everything, their shops, their inventories, their fixtures, their equipment. A small business owner in Jenkins Township said he's not sure he can recover after suffering more than $7 million in flood losses. He doesn't know if he's going to rebuild and reopen, or maybe close his doors forever. I don't know any business owner in my district who thinks a 6% government disaster recovery loan will help them get back on their feet. My district has one of the highest unemployment rates in the state, and a rate higher than the national average. The people of the 11th District in northeastern Pennsylvania need their jobs. We can't afford for these businesses to close. For the SBA to offer a ridiculously high interest rate in the name of disaster relief to these business owners is downright insulting. What rate do we charge foreign countries when we rebuild their infrastructure? The answer is 0. We don't charge foreign countries any interest. The money they receive from the United States is a giveaway. This government gave $215 million interest-free dollars for flood relief to Pakistan, a country that harbored Osama bin Laden. And it's charging American homeowners and American business owners interest rates on loans they're using to rebuild. That's wrong. We must take a serious look at how the interest rate for SBA disaster recovery loans are calculated. That's why I introduced the Disaster Loan Fairness Act of 2011, H.R. 3042. This bill would set the interest rate for all recovery loans, home disaster loans, business physical disaster loans, and economic injury disaster loans at 1% for the life of the loan up to 30 years. The rate would be effective for presidentially declared major disasters. And the 1% interest rate is retained merely to pay administrative costs for the program. This bill would not cause the government to spend any additional money. It would mean the federal government takes in less in interest from disaster recovery loans. But can anyone honestly say that providing disaster recovery loans for American homeowners and American businesses should be a money-making operation? I strongly encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 3042, the Disaster Loan Forgiveness Act. Give Americans a low interest rate and help them recover. While my neighbors in northeastern Pennsylvania recover and rebuild, they're also asking what steps are being taken to protect them in the future. This is the role of the federal government. We must make sure a disaster of this scale does not happen to these people again. First, the Army Corps of Engineers must complete a comprehensive study of the Susquehanna River Basin in my district. After the flooding caused by Hurricane Agnes in 1972, the Corps built massive levees to protect the most populated areas of the 11th District. Those levees protected thousands of homes and businesses. But many people believe they also funneled walls of water, of flood water, into unprotected areas upriver and downriver. Some of those residents were told they didn't need to buy flood insurance because they don't live in a floodplain. As these people struggle to rebuild their lives today, they want to know if the floodplain has changed. My constituents deserve to know what role, if any, these new flood walls play during this event. What is known is that some communities were devastated because they lacked adequate flood protection. For 40 years, the town of Bloomsburg has been asking for flood protection. There is a plan to provide it, but the Corps of Engineers will not fund it because it does not meet an arbitrary benefit-to-cost ratio, the BCR. Now, because of the lack of adequate flood protection in Bloomsburg, 1,000 jobs are on the verge of being lost. 2 of Columbia County's largest employers sit in the floodplain. When Fishing Creek and the Susquehanna River flood, these employers not only have to shut down production, but they also have to move equipment. That costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars. During this flood event, more than 6 feet of water poured through their shops, destroying equipment and inventory. At a time when we're talking about how to create jobs, we're not doing enough to protect these. What is the negative benefit-to-cost ratio of the Bloomsburg Flood Protection Project if we lose these jobs? What happens to this town, this county, and my district if we lose 1,000 jobs? That's just one component to the Bloomsburg. This year, about 1/3 of the buildings in that town were flooded. 1/3 of an entire town. Worse, the Bloomsburg Fair, one of the largest economic drivers for the town, the county, and dozens of community and charity groups, had to be canceled for the first time since the Civil War due to the epic flooding. What happened to Bloomsburg could have been prevented. The federal government dropped the ball. It failed to protect homes and businesses. We need to make sure that it doesn't happen again, not to Bloomsburg and not to other communities along the Susquehanna that need protection. Sadly, for some of the people I've spoken with, flood protection will come too late. Some of my constituents have told me that they will not move back into their homes. The Great Flood of 2011 was just the latest in a long line of floods that they've had to endure. They're tired of picking up the pieces of their shattered lives. Some, in fact, were in the process of being bought out by the government when this flood hit. Now they're in limbo, unsure of whether to accept federal aid or if accepting help would jeopardize their pending buyouts. This Congress needs to look at the buyout process. I fear it is too confusing. It takes too long, and it discourages people from trying to receive the help they need. Mr. Speaker, over the last several weeks, I have seen terrible destruction and hardship endured by my constituents. But I've also seen tremendous good as neighbors helped stricken neighbors, community groups banded together, charities mobilized quickly and effectively. In Plymouth Township, I met Red Cross volunteers from Michigan who made the trip to northeastern Pennsylvania to help people that they never met. In Bloomsburg, I visit Agape, a local ministry that provided flood victims with everything from cleanup buckets to hot meals. Church groups, scout troops, college clubs, sports teams, people from all across northeastern Pennsylvania and beyond came together to support each other. The recent flood was a terrible disaster, but it also brought out the best in our people. As I was driving through West Pittston, a small borough that was absolutely devastated by flooding, I saw a sign on a front porch, "The Valley with a Heart. Thank you." My constituents were knocked down, but not out. The people of northeastern Pennsylvania are strong and resilient, but they need help from the federal government. And the federal government needs to help them. If they get that help, my neighbors will come back, stronger and better than before. I yield back the balance of my time.